structural racism. That's structural racism. Clear cut, documented, and ongoing to today. The structural racism that's going on. Still to today. And see, this is why when you talk about reparations or reparative justice and people sit there and look, that's still going on today. Because what they did in North Carolina, they made it even tougher for black communities through laws to incorporate, to self-govern, self-autonomy. See, when you study these things, man, look at this stuff, man, it's hard to take. It's very hard to take because it gets you upset. That people would do this to other people. Blacks, us foundational black Americans in particular. And this is still ongoing. This structural racism is still ongoing, still built in the system. And so people, man, who say otherwise, man, you're being foolish. No matter what I keep telling myself, what's the use of me fooling myself? No matter what I keep telling myself.
Check it. Got pop from the Bronx, New York. What we do is very seldom talk. Don't mess around and get outlined and chalk. My people locked up in a jail cell. Economy's tight, so we can't make bail. Left there to rot. 3 hearts in the cop, this ain't a lot. For a city of dreams, dreams that are rarely seen. I don't know what this all means. Just weigh it up on a triple beam.
At times I wonder, no matter how many times I change it, the game still gets my number. Black clouds, it's raining, I hit thunder. Hey, I'm trying to keep them going under. I'm here.
Peace and love, family. This is Doc Pop once again, coming back at you. And the last time when I was on an interview, I told you all that I would, if I found out more about why James City is not incorporated, I would come back and let you know why. Well, after searching and doing some chatting, with the chat AI, about certain history, it was giving me a lot of fluff, a lot of word salad, so to speak. And so I asked it one question. I asked it, the bottom line, was it rooted in racism? Because it hinted on that a little bit, but it really didn't, come out right with it. It was trying to make me to believe that the people of James City were too lazy to want to be incorporated, to want to take on incorporation. But when it comes to autonomy and freedom, everybody wants to self-govern themselves. That's a part of freedom. But then I asked it, was it rooted in racism? It said, this is a real important question, and that I wasn't imagining things, that really, after everything that was trying to get me to believe and try to move my mind to think in one way, I asked it that question clearly. And so what I'm about ready to do now is not take you to everything that we talked about, because if it did, the video would be real long. But just a few important facts about James City and about why it wasn't incorporated, some points on, and then what happened, what transpired in between that time way back then, in the 1860s up until now, what happened. So the honest breakdown, James City was founded by formerly enslaved black people after the Civil War. They created a self-sufficient black community outside of New Bern, right? And it said with black, it says, because during that time, black families were being pushed out of white areas, and because nobody wanted to reside where they were, so they had to be self-sufficient, building their own communities, and they needed safety, land ownership, and self-autonomy. while white leaders had no interest in absorbing or empowering blacks, they just didn't want to empower them, so they left them on their own. So, during Reconstruction, we know that black people did great things. They started universities, they started communities, and they were really thriving. And this was one of the cities that was doing that. And that's during Reconstruction. So, when you come back to the 1860s to the 1890s, this is when that James City was thriving, between those years. They bought land, they built homes, and this was a common practice throughout the whole South, where black folks was doing their thing. They was building, they were starting families, building, and everything throughout the South. Because of course there was still racism, and white folks just didn't want them around them, so they was doing their own thing. And then of course, if they tried to buy land in white areas, it was more expensive. So during the 1890s through the 1930s, right? This is when many North Carolina towns incorporated during the 1890s to the 1930s, right? But incorporation, required approval from the white-controlled North Carolina's legislature. The political influence of Jamestown, they didn't have that. Black voting rights were stripped away. This is of course after Reconstruction. After Reconstruction, we know that the Union soldiers pulled out. These cities were no longer safe anymore. So this is after Reconstruction. This is when the voting rights were stripped away. Black towns that tried to incorporate were discouraged or denied corporation totally. So therefore, this is part of the reason why Jamestown is still not incorporated till today, because of they had no funding, no authority. These things were stripped away. They were discouraged from applying to be incorporated because they knew they would be rejected, or lack of legal and financial backing to succeed to be incorporated. Now, you got from the 1930s up into the 1960s, we had the Jim Crow era come in. So what happened was, during that time, they deliberately said, you know what, we're going to leave them barren. It seems to James City today, when you walk on the streets over there, you see that there's no sidewalks. So this is not, just because it was purposely done, because they were excluded from sewerage expansion, water system, paved roads, commercial zoning. And commercial zoning is important, because that commercial zoning, when you're able to have commercial businesses move into your community, then that's a nice little chunk of financial security and a financial base right there. All right, so they couldn't do that. They was impacted by redlining, housing discrimination, lack of bank loans, no business development incentives, and the area was mostly residential, low income, low tax base, too small or too poor to be incorporated, which was not true. Because I looked at other areas or other communities in that area where they were white based, had less people, and incorporated. You understand what I'm saying? So everything was just built into race and racism. It was built into race and racism. You know what I mean? Point blank. All right. So, and I was doing the Jim Crow era. You know, the Jim Crow era. During that era, you know, you had the clay. You had people getting hung for any little reason, and there was no safety. All right. And then, you know, they had no political power, so they wasn't being put into politics, and so, you know, these are the reasons. These are the real reasons why it's not incorporated. So, you know, in 1970 through the 1990s, you know, James City. What happened? Annexation. You know, they tried to annex. New Bern tried to annex. New Bern was primarily a Confederate city until the Union soldiers took it over in 1862. All right, but the Confederacy still lived there, still stayed there. All right, but now we see that that in between 1970 and 1990 that New Bern tried to, which is right across the bridge, the river, the Trent River, right across the river from New Bern, they tried to annex the city, James City, and what that means is they tried to take it over, and so the residents there, they strongly resisted. They saw it was a land grab, you know, they just wanted to come in and take the land, and so it would have been definitely less black autonomy, of course, and there would have been higher taxes, with probably you know, lower services. You know what I'm saying? And so, you know, it was a power move, you know, by the white establishment. All right, to absorb them into you know, in other words, you know, we're not gonna give you your city. You're going to be absorbed into ours. All right? So, meanwhile, like I said, while other cities were encouraged, you know, other white cities were encouraged to incorporate, were encouraged to, you know, govern themselves. And they were given the resources to do so. While they starved out black cities, deliberately undeveloped. They would deliberately did this. They deliberately undeveloped them to keep them poor, so that they cannot meet the obligation to incorporate. And so they didn't give them no sewers, no water, no infrastructure for decades. There was no sewer or water infrastructure for decades. Where they had poor roads. You go to James City now, you don't see no sidewalks. All right? They have fewer public services than other cities, and they had less access to loans and capital, like I mentioned before, and of course the redlining. All right, these were ways just to keep them out of the loop, you know, out of the politics, you know. And so it was definitely done deliberately, and it was definitely, you know, a racial thing, you know. And I remember listening to Judge Joe Brown talk about, no, you can't do things based on race. You know, it's the law. When these people did it based on race. So how hypocritical is that, man? You know, so they find out ways to stop us from getting our just due by coming up with these new laws or looking at little loopholes. But when it comes to them, you know, I guess they're above the law. Because everything that I'm telling you now was done according to race. You know, and it was racism according to race. Okay. Now, again, man. Now I'm just gonna give you the bottom line. From all these things, yeah, and then, you know, I want to point out that I'm gonna show you, you know, and I'm gonna put it up on the screen. The difference between James City and other white towns, and, you know, the comparison. Doing research, there was a town of just 90 people that incorporated. So that side stuff, that's just something that they feed us, But in reality, when it's a mostly black town, then they come up with all these loopholes to keep us out. But when it's a predominantly white community in town, they encourage them to do it. So that if that's not racism, I don't know what is. But I'm gonna give you the bottom line here in a minute. And but the question is, is James City not a incorporated because of its failure? And the bottom line is no. It was because it was locked out of political power, starved of investment, denied legal recognition, targeted for annexation, meaning, I could come in like they did Seneca Village, or the Bronx, South Bronx, when the Bronx was the black community, they ran the Cross Bronx Expressway through it. You know what I'm saying? So, they can do anything. If they annex something, they could land grab. They could do anything and say, oh, we want to do this here. And they're able to do it. All right? So, talking for annexation, instead of empowerment, instead of empowering them like they were doing if they needed finances to do whatever, they gave it to them. But here in James City, they discouraged them. They starved them out, so to speak. That's structural racism. That's structural racism. Clear cut, documented, and ongoing to today. The structural racism that's going on. Still to today. And see, this is why when you talk about reparations or reparative justice and people sit there and look, that's still going on today. Because what they did in North Carolina, they made it even tougher for black communities through laws to incorporate, to self-govern, self-autonomy. When you study these things, man, look at this stuff, man, it's hard to take. It's very hard to take because it gets you upset. That people would do this to other people. Blacks, us foundational black Americans in particular. And this is still ongoing. This structural racism is still ongoing, still built in the system. And so people, man, who say otherwise, man, you're being foolish. You're being foolish. Now, and this is, so the unincorporated status of James City as well as every other city black city that didn't incorporate, man, was definitely rooted in racism. All right, connected to racism. Nobody want to say it out loud, but I'm saying it out loud. It was racism. While the town that my grandfather was born in isn't incorporated to today. Racism. And you think that affects me today? Absolutely. Because guess what? Because if it didn't force him out, then he would still be there. And that's where I would have been born at. Come on. All right. Let me calm down. But it was structured, man, for long term. All right? And it's still today. All right? So let's just go over this thing, man. So it was founded by black people escaping slavery. It was denied political recognition. It was starved of infrastructure and capital. Was blocked from organic growth. It was targeted for autonomy instead of empowerment. And now, because of the changes in the law, all right, it don't pass the test of today's standards because the law was changed just to keep them out, man. I don't really, and see, it's textbook structural racism is what it is. Right? Now, I hope that right there, man, would satisfy you and know why. And there's a way. And there's a way for them to at least attempt, even till today, to get incorporated. If not incorporated, to just go on that road leading to incorporation. But they gonna need the backing of politicians. They're going to need the backings of organizations like the NAACP, which we know that they, what are they? If they didn't get to this thing sooner and made sure these things, what are they, man? Are they just like, what you call it? You just standing there, man, to block things, to stop things, to make things go smoothly for the establishment? Or are you really trying to, help black folk? You know what I mean? Or be what you call that? Be a political gatekeeper. You know what I'm saying? Because that's what it seems like to me. Because it seemed like to me that this thing should have been resolved. This thing should have been talked about. But now there was a town called Princeville, North Carolina, that did gain their independence. And I know we're not talking about that, but I'm gonna just ease on away from Jamestown for a minute and tell you about another black town called Princeville, man, that did gain their incorporation and their independence to South Autonomous. But guess what? They were flooded out a couple of times. They were flooded out and tried to almost destroy it. Don't that sound familiar, y'all? I'm talking about being flooded out. Okay? So yeah, they were flooded out 2 times, and so this is what happened. They did incorporate, but these white, they didn't stop. They didn't stop. They tried to do away with them. And I'd like to visit that town in North Carolina one day. So basically, I think I basically covered it all, man. So if you want me to cover something else, or if you want me to talk about something else pertaining to James City and incorporation, then leave it in the comment section. And I'll definitely respond to you. Now, another thing that I wanted to say, man, before I get up off of here was that there is a way that James City could incorporate, but like I said, it's going to need support from political support. It's going to need definitely community support, and it will need other organizational support to at least establish James City, which we know it is, as an historical place. See, that's the beginning. You got to establish yourself as a historical place, and so therefore you can get special grants and things like this here. I've got it all written down, man, what they need to do, but I live in New York. My grandfather was from James City. When I go back, I'm just going to ask these questions, man, because there is a way going forward. But, the world is not going to be easy, but what has ever been easy for us, right? But we managed to overcome time and time again, right? So, hey, listen, like, I still didn't forget about that Chat GPT. I got a whole bunch of things, man, and this ain't even on though. But anyway, I got a whole, thing that I want to do, and I want to go through it with the Chat GPT based on the Revolutionary War and what role did blacks play in the Revolutionary War, and one black in particular that I happened to stumble across from Cobblton County over there at Newburgh, where my grandfather was born, and the things that he'd done that were very significant in the U.S. winning the Revolutionary War. Yeah. So, until next time, people, peace and blessings, man. Don't forget to share the video, like the video, subscribe to the channel. Okay? Peace and love, people.
Hey family. Yes, stop once again. I just wanted to touch a little bit about Seneca Village. I know I mentioned it in the presentation on why James City
is not incorporated until today. Silicon Village is right here in New York, or was right here in New York, found in 1825 by Black Americans. And it was a thriving city. And so what happened in 1857, they said, well, you know, these blacks shouldn't have this prime real estate. So through eminent domain, they forced them out, and they were inadequately compensated, and some were never paid. And so as far as reallocation assistance, they got none. And they also destroyed churches and grave sites. That sounds familiar, because I know they did the same thing in James City. So I just want to touch on that a little bit and let you know a little bit about, you know, the pattern with these folks, you know, the wickedness. All right, people, have a blessed rest of the day or evening or morning. If one of